I gotta wait. How long I gotta wait for a press record?
Go.
Welcome to the share, where Miss Dreme always has a story.
I'm Dreme, a black woman with many beautiful interconnecting identities. A few I will name at this moment as we get started on this podcast journey together. A Bostonian, born and raised in the inner city, Dorchester and Roxbury neighborhoods, to a teenage single mother who has my whole heart. An educator, I've been working with youth and children since my teenage years, and formally, I have been teaching almost a decade now. That's wild to think about. An entrepreneur, I am the founder of The Chair, a black and brown centered tech platform dedicated to supporting people on their hair journey, where you can design hairboards, connect to hairstylists, and share hair care tips for a more joyous experience. I have a workable site, my prototype. It took me 2 years to build, and now I'm on this adventure that you're currently on with me. My goal for this podcast is to share stories, black stories, educator stories, entrepreneurship stories, and hair stories. I want you to leave each episode with the opportunity to gain new insight, just a glimpse into my world or the worlds that are featured on my podcasts, a little chuckle during your day or night, possibly a little anger to encourage you to advocate for justice, and hope to continue learning and dreaming. So come in and listen to the beautiful voices in the chair as they share their stories, starting with me.
Where we share stories in the chair.
Hello, beautiful people. It's Dreme, and today I want to talk about a story recently with a job I had in education where I was told I was scaring kids. How me, you've been listening to this podcast, an educator almost 10 years in, is being accused of scaring children. Well, let me tell you the story. I had moved back from South Africa, just finished my Fulbright, was volunteering, doing workshops, things like that as I was looking for jobs. Then a job comes across my lap where I would be able to finally work in Boston public schools. I am a Bostonian, born and raised in Dorchester and Roxbury, and so finally being able to work in the public school system of Boston as a black woman, as a black educator, has been on my list for a very long time. About this job, what I also really enjoyed is that it was in partnership with a community college. So I'll be working in a high school, working in partnership with a community college as an educator, as what they called me a professor, but I was really teaching in the early college programming for high school juniors. Which made this even more exciting was that I would be able to build my own curriculum from scratch, which I love to do, be able to build the class how I wanted. I just knew that I would have juniors interested in taking an entrepreneurship course 2 times a week for an hour each day, and that we would be able to be together for about 12 weeks. So I was excited. This would get my feet wet again, since it wasn't full-time, it was part-time. I'll be able to still work in the entrepreneurship space and education space and be able to work with Boston public school kids. My first day I come in, just so you know, my style, I wear really rainbow cardigans. I had rainbow braids, and I come in with my Black Lives Matter shirt, my jeans and my Converses, and my LED light up cat headphones. So that's how I introduce myself physically. And then, of course, I go through, here are all my degrees, here are my credentials, here's all the skills that I'm bringing that I'm truly excited for. I come in and I'm about to lay out all the red flags that happened on this very first day that did not stop me from coming back the following day. I get to the job early and I'm told that I would have my own classroom. They said, you will not have your classroom. You'll be using somebody else's classroom. Flag number 1. Flag number 2, they didn't tell the teacher that I would be using their classroom. And as teachers know, when you use other teachers' space, you're entering into their sanctuary. It's already starting off a bad foot because it looks like I'm bulldozing into someone else's classroom. Flag number 3, I was told my classroom would be at a specific time, and they said, nope, that's wrong. This is the time your classroom is at. They changed the time that I was informed of months before. Flag number 4 was I was supposed to have support beforehand. Didn't know any of the people who were supposed to support me. All the emails that were sent, I wasn't receiving any responses. So again, I was like, well, people are busy. But when I got there, I learned that people just didn't know what their roles were. So again, these are all flags before I even step into the classroom to meet the children. Also, I built the curriculum already. I assigned them some get to know you things so I can at least start to see where kids were at in terms of their knowledge and their writing skills. And none of the kids did it. So when I was talking to the staff, I was like, hey, is there something wrong? They're like, nope. Kids have taken these early college courses before. This is advanced, so they know what they're doing. And I said, but none of the kids have responded. They go, I think maybe they had internet problems and you're creating this expectation that these kids will do it. So I said, okay. I took them at their word. Here's where flag number 5 comes in, where the lady who was supposed to be my support walks in with me to the first class. I have my kids, they're sitting down at the desk, and before I say anything, she's like, hey, I just wanted to ask if anybody had any internet issues, the reason why you didn't do any of the work. And all the kids shook their heads, said no, they didn't have any internet issues. So I was like, okay, so the expectation was not met. So this is flag number 5 about staff not checking in with kids about why they didn't complete the work. After she tried to explain that there was an internet issue and there was not, I asked the kids, I said, hey, so all of you saw my assignments? They shook their head, yes. I said, and none of you chose to do them. I said, why? And a kid stood up and he said, yeah, I saw it. I got the email. Why the fuck am I going to do that work for?
Where we share stories in the chair.
Look, it's my commercial. We will be right back.
It's more than just a bad hair day. It's a journey. Finding the right hairstyle isn't easy, nor is finding the right stylist or the right products. Looking in every corner of the web gets messy, overwhelming, and exhausting. All the ads, the articles, the products, the videos, it shouldn't be this hard, but it is. And now, it isn't.
The chair.
A black and brown centered platform where you can design hairboards, connect to hairstylists, and share hair care tips for a new, joyful path on your hair journey. Avoid the clutter, save yourself hours, months, and even years of research and poor trial and error. Everything you need and only what you need is in one place. Hairboards made by people like you, for you. Find the right products, the right people, the right answers for you, stress-free. Join
The chair.
the community and make every day a great hair day. When you share your pain, you allow others to help you. And when you share your success, you help others get theirs. Lean on.
The chair.
We got you.
No stress, no strife. In the chair. The chair. The chair. All right.
I chuckled because he wanted a rise out of me, which he did not get. But it was a signal. This isn't a flag. This was a signal that what was cared for was not homework to me. So that was the first thing I thought. And then the second thing I thought was that this is an opt-in class. So none of the kids that were in that class, all 17 of them at the beginning, were forced to be there, had to be there, needed to be there. I also thought, there's something going on with this culture of this school where even in an opt-in class, they chose not to do the pre-work for a college course. After my kid stood up and boldly told me why he didn't do his work, the rest of that day was just more of me just trying to understand why the kids were enrolled in the class, just asking a bunch of questions that were on the pre-work in the class. So I was like, okay, everything I had for the first thought is gone, and I'm just going to keep talking to these kids to figure out where their mindset is at this time. I also explain my values, and I explain my rules and my expectations in class. Because at the first day of class, no kid had a notebook or a pen or a pencil in front of them. And so again, I'm trying to understand, how do they expect to learn without any materials in front of them? That was the end of my first day. The following class, I come back and I asked the community college to order notebooks, so we get notebooks for the kids to take that issue out of the equation. I bring my books from my home, my notes, sticky notes, and my written hand notes all inside, and have every kid choose a business-related book from my own library to have, because I was like, we're going to start by being able to build their education, their business education knowledge through the stuff that we already know, and having them also be able to connect and relate to me by picking up books in my library. So they're slowly getting to know me as well. My helper, the lady who showed up a few days before, quit the following day, which was flag number 6. But again, I was like, life happens. Maybe she just didn't want to be there. So I didn't put too much thought into it. So I end up getting a TA, and my TA is a white trans man. I've never had a white TA before, and I've never had a white trans TA before. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, how can I support my TA who has dreams of possibly working in education but hasn't had any positive experiences before me? And still also think about, how does their whiteness show up when they're questioning my style, or when they're asking me things that I'm like, would they ask this if I wasn't a black woman? So we're working through those things together, and he was great, and he learned a lot with me. I'm learning that my kids don't have any expectations for the class, and they also don't have any accountability for themselves. So class starts on time. Kids are strolling in with AirPods. They're late. And so then I'm like, hey, we start on time. Hey, these are the things that we do. And I'm being told by my TA that this is all new for them, that this accountability. I was telling them, hey, you have a paper due. And when we say paper, I think, let me just explain what this looks like. So I had them twice a week. And so I had them write a 1-page paper in MLA format, which we know is the least complex citation. So I was just getting them in the habit. My TA told me that my juniors don't write papers, that they haven't written a paper before. And so when I asked them to submit the paper for the first time, I had kids submit papers in pink font. I had kids submit paper in some italicized font that you fool around with on Word when you're in the 5th grade, and it's all underlined and bolded. I had kids submit papers in 20-point font. So there was no structure, there was no clear way that this was an essay at all, and even though it was just a page. And kids didn't even follow the directions of a page. My juniors don't know how to write papers. So I was like, okay, well, we're going to write papers and we're going to work on this long-term presentation. And then I'm being told by my TA, these kids have never presented before. And this is the time where I get a little frustrated, because I think about all the stereotypes that people have about Boston public schools or public schools in general. And then I think about where I went to school. I went to Buckingham, Brown and Nichols High School, a private school, where my junior year we were writing papers every other week that had to be 3 to 5 pages. And then we had our big profile paper that we had to do that was over 10 pages. We also had our big research history paper that was over 10 pages. And I'm asking kids, juniors who are in a college program, and this is supposed to prepare them for college, be their first introduction to college. And my kids are passing in papers in pink font. Some are even passing in papers on pink paper. So with that, I learned that everything I had, I was going to have to rearrange everything. And I think this is important because it's not dumbing down the material. It is creating scaffolds. You create scaffolds, but you're still using the material, but you're just breaking it down in different ways. So me and my TA would talk to me like, hey, these are the things you can do when I'm not here. Here are the ways to break down how to write an essay. Again, only a page. So that was one fight. Presentation was a second fight. The third fight was my kids didn't do any of the reading. I said, we're going to have an open book, open note quiz every week. And one kid said, every week? I said, yes, every week. And so at the beginning, my kids were just getting zeros. Again, open book, open note. And then I was told by my TA, well, your kids don't know how to take notes. I said, all right, we're going to learn how to take notes. Let me teach you these different type of note-taking skills for the videos I want them to watch. These aren't documentaries. These are 7 to 30-minute videos where I'm asking them questions about what they saw. What are the connections that they drew? We're doing readings from different articles that you can change by grade level. So I'm purposely just using different ways to introduce concepts to kids. So again, creating scaffolds, but still using the same material that juniors would use. I'm using examples that kids would see. So I'm pulling stuff from Twitter. I'm pulling stuff from Instagram. I'm pulling stuff from their world. So they are familiar, but now they're able to look at it from a different perspective. Now that I've set that up, this doesn't mean that things are going well in my eyes. So I have almost 10 years. So I know that, okay, well, the first couple weeks are going to be rough, but we're going to get somewhere. But this is an opt-in class. So kids are starting to drop. And they can explain why they're dropping. Well, Miss Dreme, she expects too much of us. Miss Dreme, she's making us do work. She's giving us homework. And my response every time was, this is a college level course and you opted into this. And I'm only asking for one paper a week, which is only 1 page, and open book, open note quiz once a week, which they can easily do really well at if they did any of the reading. This was my system. And every class we would go over the work. We would talk through the notes. They would ask questions. We would dig into it. But my class kept getting smaller and smaller because Dreme had expectations. In week 2, I was being told by bigger heads at the school that my class was challenging and I should think about not giving them so much work. And so I decided, because I was frustrated that I felt like they were watering down the material, that they weren't going to give kids the real opportunity to really use their critical thinking skills, I decided to go sit in on one of my kids' classroom. Because if they're saying I'm doing too much, let me go see what's happening in the school. Oh, and if you're interested to learn more about my experiences as a Black woman, an educator in Guangzhou, China, I wrote my first ebook titled Nowhere and Everywhere, Captured Emotions of a Beautifully Broken Love Story. It is on lulu.com. Take a read and see some beautiful photography of mine. Enjoy the rest of the show. My TA, shout out to him for helping me get into a junior level class where a handful of the kids in there I had in my class. 2 were in, 3 had dropped, and they saw me walk in and they're like, hey, what are you doing here? I'm like, hey, I'm just here to observe. I talked to the teacher. People are like, well, this school is different. You may have a teacher who doesn't know what they're doing. This teacher was a veteran teacher. She had 15 years on her in the classroom. So I was like, that's not an excuse. And she wasn't scared of the kids. So I'm like, all right, I'm here to learn. What is the style? What is happening? Class starts and half the class is there. And I was like, this is the same problem I'm having where kids aren't showing up on time. The kids that are there are on their laptop, phone, AirPods in. Same problems that I was having where I would spend the first 5 minutes of every class telling kids to close their laptops, take out their AirPods. Let's be aware and prepared. But this teacher didn't do that. She begins teaching at the front of the class, and there's a kid I'm sitting next to who is on his phone as the teacher is starting. And so she's teaching. The lesson's actually really interesting, but kids aren't engaged at all. 15 minutes into class, the other half of the class comes in, and they're loud, clearly as if class didn't start. There was no acknowledgement of the teacher. A couple kids said hello, walked in. Some sat down. One kid decided to start making coffee in the middle of class. They had a little tea set in the back. One kid got up and took a phone call in the middle of class, gave the pointer finger to the teacher telling her to wait, I have to take this phone call, and left. Slams the door. And they also have a little, next to the teapot, they have a little stove, and one kid decides to make ramen noodles in class. This is all going on as I'm sitting in the back of the class next to the kid who was on their cell phone, and the teacher is still going ahead teaching at the front of the classroom. When the bell rings and class is over, she comes up to me and says, hey, we're just still trying to gel. So for me now, I had proof that this was a school culture thing. This is what is happening. We are letting kids just do what they want to do, and no one is learning from the material, from each other. They're just distracted. And so, of course, when I'm having kids come to class on time and I'm expecting them to do the work, and I'm going to look at every notebook page, and I want them to pull out their papers, and I'm very quick in my turnaround to give them their grades back so they know what they're doing in my class. Of course they're frustrated with me, and they decide to drop because that means they have to keep themselves accountable or learn what accountability is through my class. We're a month in, and I have 5 kids because they've dropped. But these solid 5, they're still here. Even out of my 5, I still have kids who are refusing to read or do any of the work, but they come to class every day that I have them. I'm like, we're going to be committed, even if they don't do any work. So this particular week was presentation week. So we've been working on our presentations, and since I learned that these kids have never presented before, I had zero expectation, but I just wanted them to try. I was like, let's see their style. Let's see how they sound. Let's see all these different elements. And I just want them to try. It wasn't going to be graded, but we need to get into this habit. So we had presentation day. So all the kids were required to present. And when we sit down, we're about to prepare to get ready. One of my kids says, Miss Dreme, I'm not presenting today. I said, that's not a choice. You are presenting today. She goes, I don't want to present. I said, that's not a choice. We've been working on this. We've been working our way up to this. That is not a choice. So then she starts to cry. I said, you can cry. That is fine. You just won't go first. But everybody is going to present today. So kids are starting to present, and it's going well. Every kid is starting to really learn what it is to present. My first kid was an amazing, charismatic person, but her slides were a mess. But her charisma came through. And after every presentation, we were able to give feedback. So they were learning how to sandwich. They were learning what positive critiques look like. They understood what it meant to really take the feedback, to really see the difference. My second kid, she was so soft-spoken, you couldn't really hear her. But her slides, her design, beautiful. So our charismatic kid was like, oh, you need to speak up. And then she was like, well, your slides just need to be cleaner. Take out all these unnecessary details. So we were starting to really learn. So it was starting to click. And after the first two go, my kid who's crying says, hey, can I go to the bathroom? And you know that if a kid is crying, if they decide to go to the bathroom, there's a chance they may not come back. Teachers know this. In my head, I'm like, if I let her go, she's not going to come back. So she left. Kid 3 is presenting while the other kid is still in the bathroom. I realize she's gone for a while. I was like, I don't think she's coming back. Then a black woman, comes into my classroom. For context, I've never seen this black woman ever. In the month that I've been there, when I've asked for support, all the things, this woman has never appeared. Also, for context, my classroom, the door is glass, and so are all the windows, so you can see into the hallway. So she comes in and she yells as the kid is presenting, who's in charge here? And I go, I am. I said, how may I help you? And she goes, well, there's a kid of yours crying, and she shouldn't be crying, and she's passed 4 teachers in the hallway who have watched her cry, and that is unacceptable. I go, okay, I hear you, but I'm in the middle of working with these kids right now. Like, can you come back? She goes, that's unacceptable. And then she leaves, slams the door, and then walks out. I'm like, all right, kids, just continue. We don't know what this is. So she continues. My kid is still presenting, and then she comes back, and she goes, we need to talk. And I said, I'm clearly in the middle of class right now. You can come back after class. She again slams the door and leaves. But she stands behind the door in this intimidating stance because I can see her through the window. And so the kids are presenting. We're wrapping up. The 4th kid is going. This kid, very organized, but she doesn't put any effort. She's the one who spits off the dome, and she's learning, like, that's only going to get her so far. So she's like, hey, miss, I actually want to take the quiz today, which was a big step because this kid never read. And she finally wanted to take a quiz today. I said, did you read? I was like, where are your notes? It's open book, open note. She goes, yes, I actually read today. And I said, okay, this is great. So in this month, I finally got this kid to finally take some accountability. And the adult comes back in the room, and she starts to yell at my kid who's taking the quiz, saying, you need to leave. Adults need to talk right now. And I go, hey, how about you send an email? We'll talk through this, and we'll come back to it. Let's just wrap up this day. She goes, email is not personal. We need to have this conversation right now. So my kid who was taking the quiz ends up having to leave the classroom. I made sure my TA was in the room because situations like this happen all the time. And I'm like, I need another adult here to be able to see what's happening. And she ends up starting to yell. I refuse to yell at black women. Black women are always being yelled at in life or targeted for X amount of reasons. So I do not add to the madness of that. So I decided to clean up as she starts to yell. She goes, this is the problem I have with you teachers. This is the problem I have with you professors. You don't think about social-emotional training. Again, she hasn't introduced herself. I don't know her name. She doesn't know my background. That social-emotional training is something that's super important to me. And she's like, you don't know what it is about this kid's life. This kid didn't even want to be an entrepreneur. She shouldn't even be in your class. Again, the kid has never come back, and she's like, she's not going to come back. I refuse for her to come back into your classroom because she was crying like that. She was crying in your classroom. That's unacceptable. Again, she didn't ask me what happened. She wants to be a doctor, so she shouldn't even be in this class. Again, she is not talking to me. She is ranting. So I am putting up desks. I am wiping down tables. I am wiping down boards. And I tell my TA, like, hey, I'm just going to send this email to make sure everybody is aware of what's happening. And I look at her. I said, hey, it was nice to meet you and hear from you. I'm going to send an email. I also believe you should send an email as well for your side of the story. And I hope you have a great day. And I leave. And I did what I said. I sent the email to the people at the community college and the people at the Boston Public School about the situation that happened. And the only thing I asked was for her not to be in my classroom again because I thought it was just rude and unprofessional, and she shouldn't have talked like that in front of me, to me, and in front of kids. So then there was an emergency meeting, of course, called with me and my relationship with the community college. and they asked me for my point of view. I explained them the story. They've also been getting emails regularly about all the red flags, all the things that have not been going well at the school. Kids walking out of my class, kids not showing up, kids not doing any work, all these things. But then also I told them about being like, hey, I visited a classroom and here's the culture that I've learned. These kids haven't been exposed to X, Y, and Z things. And they were like, okay, thank you for letting us know. We'll get back to you. So they get back to me after they've had a conversation with this other woman who I learn eventually is a social worker, which is crazy to me because I'm like, wow, as a social worker, there are 40 other ways that you could have approached this situation. But the one thing I did know was that she was passionate about the kids. Her delivery was problematic. How she approached a potential solution was also problematic and not helpful. But again, that was the culture of the school. Like either people were asking, the culture of the school was kids were running it. Kids had a problem, they would complain, and then, or they would get more time. I watched kids in the hall do nothing instead of going to class, and the kids would be like, well, the teacher doesn't care about me. So I get an emergency call back saying, hey, we want to talk to you. This is what we heard from the public school's point of view. The public school's point of view said that I, Dreme, was making kids anxious. And I said, well, I believe that's true. If these kids have never been held accountable, have to turn things on time, have to show up to class ready to learn, and all their other classes, they don't necessarily have to do that, then yes, they would be a little anxious. And they said, okay, we hear you. They also said that they don't feel like they can ask questions. And I was like, that's not true. I was like, every kid had my cell phone number. At the beginning of every class and at the end of every class, we would ask a Q&A. And through the links and the websites that we had to use for the school and the emails, we would have a detailed report of what we learned in class that day. So I was like, that is not necessarily true. And they were like, okay, well, the last thing is, they said that you are scaring the kids. I said, scaring them how? And they couldn't really give me a response. They said, that's just what we're hearing. And I was like, that sounds like someone is in their ear saying that to them. Because in all the classes, I'm talking to the kids after class. It's like they have my books. I'm coming in class with glow-in-the-dark ears. Like I'm not intimidating. So they were like, we hear you. They were like, is there a way that you could relax with some of your material? And I said, well, these kids are not writing at junior level writing. They've never presented and they don't know how to write papers. How do you want to approach that? If they are not writing in my class, if they aren't doing the readings or watching the videos, how do you want to approach teaching these kids? And they were like, that's a good point. I said, exactly. And I said, also, if they are using the word scared, which I don't think is necessarily from the children, I think it's from the adults who are scared to actually be held accountable for how they are teaching kids or not teaching them, then I am not the person for you. And I quit. I think about that because as a person who's almost 10 years into teaching, I could be very, very angry if you asked me at the beginning of my career, which I was angry a lot at how the system was. I could be extremely sad. Those emotions were still there, being like, man, I didn't have my full 12 weeks with them. I only had 4. But then I also learned in my 4 weeks that this school isn't helping them thrive. This school is setting them up for failure, and that when they graduate and decide to go to college, their first semester, they're going to become that statistic where they get into school and then they're going to drown while they're there and then flunk out because no one is holding them accountable. And they're just coddling them. And if you're going to say that I'm scaring the children, then it's not meant for me to be there. And it doesn't mean that I love those kids any less. I recently saw one of the kids who I was teaching because, again, I live in the neighborhood. And I said, hey, you were reading one of my books. I told them to buy you a new book. Did they buy it for you? And she goes, no, I never got it. And she happened to work down the street. And I said, hey, I'm going to drop off my book and you can keep it. And that's what I did. So I know that kid will remember that I cared enough to give her that book that she was so invested in, so enthralled in. This kid, out of the month I was there, was really committed. She was trying to learn. She was really trying to understand how to be a better student, a better entrepreneur. She had goals and she started to change. And if that book can keep that energy up for her, then it was worth it for me.
Welcome to the chair, where Miss Dreme always has a story.
Thank you for listening to an episode of The Chair. I, of course, would love your continued support. Let me know what you think of this episode by doing all the things. Subscribe, comment, and come back next week, every week. Enjoy the rest of your beautiful day. Or if you are like me, enjoy that moonlight and that one star under all your city lights. Love you. Talk to you later.
The chair.
How long I gotta wait for a press record?
Go.
We support her. Shit.
Do your...
Welcome to the chair, where Miss Dreme always has a story. Where we share